podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to How We're the Podcast, and hopefully you've had a chance to listen to the first part of our Big Fat season review, where Gav and Martin took us through the first part of the season. We touched a little bit on pre-season. We had aimed in that first part to get through half of the season, but predictably only reached the 9th game of the season while taking twice the amount of time we plan to take. But that's what happens when you start reviewing one of the best summers in living memory for Sunderland AFC. That leads into one of the best seasons in living memory. But it was good to go back through some of those games, like the opening day of the season, of course, and our first away win of the season, and where we finished up part one, which was after a victory at Stamford Bridge. That put us second in the Premier League table for just less than 24 hours. But I am looking forward to getting back into the games and getting on with it. And luckily, I have a couple of people to join me. And first up, it's Martin Wunless. Hello, Martin.
Hello, mate. Yeah, look, I was feeling guilty about the amount of time that we spent discussing the first. You do us a disservice. You said the first 9 games. We did talk about the League Cup game against Huddersfield as well, so that was 10. But, I was feeling a little bit guilty about this. But as you say, I think it's the best season in living memory, if not the second. And, it's not as if we're spending all this time reviewing the Terry Butcher, Mick Buxton season or the Laurie McMenemy season, are we? So, we've got some just cause to spend some time on it. So you've made me not feel guilty now, which is always nice, Chris. Well done.
Yeah, well, a very much a Southampton apology, non-apology there from Martin. But there you go. But yes, I would apologise, but I'm not gonna. But that's it. We'll just end up having fun talking about this season because I think everyone can't get enough of it. And today, as well as Martin, I'm very pleased to say we have Andrew Smithson with us. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, mate. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we're in bother of you bringing me in to try and slim down these episodes and move things along a little bit.
God, you've just reminded us, Andrew. We've got the on this week thing. Bloody hell.
Cancel all my meetings for the rest of the week.
I hope anyone listening's got a long dog walk ahead of them because I tell you what, we're going to be here for a few hours going through the rest of the season. But Andrew, we had Gav and Martin on part 1, and you're joining us for this part 2. We have getting up to the Chelsea game, of course, on the 25th of October, which was a fantastic win that put us second in the table for, like I said, for 24 hours. I think we dropped down to 7th with the results or something on the Sunday. But 9 games had been played at this point. But after this game, I'm pretty sure, and I'm trying to remember, we did the match day podcast straight after, and we were all giddy. We'd out of the first 9, we'd won 5, drawn 2, lost 2. We were 2 points behind Arsenal at the top of the table. We were a point ahead of Manchester City. Those, of course, had a game in hand. But we weren't half on cloud 9 at this point.
Oh, definitely. Now, do you want me to recap all of the games to that point? Or
No.
Maybe start with the playoffs, actually. Start with the playoffs.
Yeah. You're right, Chris. You and I did speak shortly after full time, and I dread to think how giddy I sounded. I think I must have been like a little teenager. I was just so excited and chuffed with the team. Even the most positive of fans, I don't think it expected us to have had that good a start. So yeah, it was good times, and it continued. You could pick so many games where you went, oh, Andrew, I think you and I talked after this game, and Andrew, you were like just gushing with praise for the team. But yeah, that was a big one, winning at Chelsea.
Yeah, it was a fantastic high moment in a season full of highs. So it was a good place to end part 1 completely accidentally, because if we plan these things, it would never work out as well as that, to be honest. But as I said, we'd just beaten Chelsea. And then a week later, Martin, we've got David Moyes' Everton coming to town. And the build-up was actually around the fitness of Alderete and whether he'd be fit. And it turned out that it was the first time that we put out an unchanged side all season. But considering the performance of Chelsea, it was a really sloppy start against Everton. I mean, again, looking back through my notes of this game, I wrote down that it was the worst 30 minutes of the season, the opening half an hour. And we ended up going down after 14 minutes. But Xhaka got one back just before half time. We were the better side in the second half and ended up getting a 1-1 draw. But it was strange after that Chelsea game where the first half was so flat.
Look, it wasn't. Going into this game, you're wondering if we can repeat that level of performance that we saw against Chelsea. And the first half of this game, I think, was the worst that we played all season up to that point. I thought we were sloppy. I thought we were really lucky just to be a goal down at half time. I thought we could have been 3-0 down if Everton had put the chance away. I think they hit the post in there and Roos made a good save as well. And it was against David Moyes, and of course, you always want to. I was going to say wipe the smile off his face, but he rarely smiles, does he? So wipe whatever he has on his face off his face. You always want the opportunity to do that. The thing I remember about this game, it was actually off the pitch. It was the weather, Chris. No, I'm only joking. It was the interview that Kira Louis-Dreyfus gave to Sky before the game. I think that's the first time he'd really spoken that season. And he talked all about the grand plans. And of course, people were starting to talk about us now, weren't they? People had looked at us from the start of the season and, you get a couple of wins and people think it's that bounce from coming up and, part of it probably is. But after the Chelsea win, people were starting to pay a little bit more attention. I think there was a big feature on us on Sky before this game, because obviously it was a Monday night game on Sky. And Kira Louis-Dreyfus had sort of outlined his ambition and his plans, which I thought was interesting because you don't really hear too much from him. But that first half performance, it was flat. We just did not get going. And as has happened a few times this season, we've had a slow start or a slow half. And they've got them in the dressing room. And whoever has got hold of them's got hold of them. And we came out in the second half, all guns blazing. And, I was going to say fortunate. I think it was fortunate we got the goal from Xhaka. It was deflected, wasn't it? Past Pickford. But we had that little bit of fortune on our side to get that goal. And by the end of it, we probably should have won. But going in half time, again, I was one of those where I'm glad it's only 1-0 because it could have been done and dusted by the 45-minute mark. So it was a good point, all told, but it was a funny one. Yeah, you're kind of proud about the second half performance, but frustrated and disappointed with the first half.
You said we were fortunate as well, Martin, actually. Looking back again, that there was a break in the 93rd minute where Everton broke away, made a breakaway.
That's right.
Yes. 2-1. It was actually Ronaldo who saved the day in the 93rd minute. We could have chucked it all away. So, like I said, we've always said, Martin, for donkeys, that these things just pivot on these massive moments that could take a game from being a good performance to taking nothing at all. But we got a point out of the Everton game, and that took us into Arsenal, the visit of Arsenal. So we had 2 home games in a week, Andrew. And at this point, Arsenal were absolutely flying. But having said that, we had an unchanged side for the first time of the season against Everton previously. We were unchanged again. So it was a 3rd game in a row that we went with the same 11. And, talking about ups and downs of a season, fantastic at Chelsea, kind of a bit iffy in that first half against Everton. We were absolutely fantastic against Arsenal. We were brilliant against one of the best sides in Europe, as it's turned out, and of course one of the best sides winning the Premier League, of course. But it was, talking about one of the moments of the seasons when we did our rankings in the podcasts that we did. This was in there. The fact that we went toe-to-toe with Arsenal at this point and came out with that draw. But the fact that we took the lead and came back from behind against a side that weren't even conceding shots, never mind goals, just shows that at this point, the team was probably the highest confidence they had throughout the season.
That's a fair suggestion, Chris. I think confidence was high amongst the team. I don't know how high it was amongst the fans, because I remember in the build-up to this week, looking at these two home games, Everton at that point had started the season quite strongly, and people were thinking this is going to be a real test. We're playing against Arsenal, who, as you say, were looking like the best team in Europe. We're playing against Everton, who are in form. There was people saying we might get a couple of defeats here and we'll just have to accept that. So to have already got a point against Everton, having not been at 100%, and then built on that against Arsenal was fantastic. We've mentioned a few times when Arsenal went 2-1 up, you could tell from their celebrations, you could tell from their response that they knew they were in a really tough game and they thought they'd come out of that test with all 3 points. They were really pleased with themselves. So for us to recover from that, and it is hard when you're playing against a top team and they finally nudge a goal ahead. It is hard to get back into things, but we battled, we matched them, we got an equaliser, and if my memory's correct, a lot of neutrals looked at that game and maybe started to change their opinions about Sunderland. The general feeling was, yeah, this was a fair result. This wasn't a team that had just, parked the bus against Arsenal. This was a team who've actually pushed them hard and give them a test. So it was a big point for us, and it showed that whilst the players have confidence, it showed everybody else as well that yeah, we can believe in Sunderland and okay, so it's early November at that time. It was still fairly early in the season. It was just another indicator that this isn't a flash in the pan. This is a Sunderland team who deserve to be at this level.
It was interesting as well, wasn't it? Because the narrative all the way through this early part of the season was, oh, they haven't played anybody yet. And you go away to Chelsea and you win, you go, oh, bloody lucky last minute, go blah, blah. Yeah, still haven't played anyone really. This was the biggest test that we'd had at home so far this season. You know, the other home games that we'd obviously had West Ham, Brentford, Aston Villa, Wolves. This felt like that we were back in the Premier League. This game was the point for me that was like, we are back. And the crowd was up for it. The team was flying into challenges. And that really went toe-to-toe with Arsenal, who were a bloody physical side. And if you look back on the goals and how the game kind of panned out, you know, obviously Ballard gets the opener for us. Really well-deserved goal, really well-taken goal. It was an Enzo Lefebvre mistake that lets them back into this game. If you remember, he got the ball kind of on the edge of our box or 10 yards away from our box, tried to turn, play a ball, and they got intercepted, and Arsenal capitalised on it. And that just showed the quality that we're up against, because it wasn't as if he passed it straight at somebody who had an open net. There was an awful lot of work to do, but the slightest mistake, they're going to capitalise on it. And it's really interesting when you look back on Lefebvre's role in the team and on the season after that, because he gets dragged off 10 minutes after that. Now, I don't think that happens now. I think he leaves him on now because he knows that he'll use that as motivation to get back into the game. But it was really interesting he took him off. The rely on the worldie from Trossard to get back into this game is a brilliant goal. It looks as if there's nothing on, he just hits it, doesn't he? And it flies past Robin Roofs. I remember there was an instant where I think Calafiori, I don't think he actually got booked in the game, but he should have been booked twice in the second half. He made a couple of fouls, and they really could have been down to 10 men, but of course Arsenal weren't allowed to get players sent off or concede penalties last season. But Brobby gets the last minute goal. I think that's Brobby's first goal for us. He's been coming off the bench, hasn't he? He hasn't had a start. And he's just looking as if he's getting a bit of fitness, looking as if he's getting back into it. He's come off the back of that Chelsea game where he held the ball up for half an hour before Talby came and scored the goal. So this is Brobby really announcing himself to the stadium-like crowd as well. And it was a fantastic goal to level it, wasn't it? I still don't know how he really put it in. But this, to me, was that marker that, right, we are capable of competing against everybody. Because even though we've witnessed all the performances so far this season with our own eyes, you've got that narrative from outside going, "Oh, you haven't played anybody yet." After this game, we had played somebody. We'd gone absolutely toe-to-toe with them, and we could have easily won that game. So that was one of those where you go, you know what? I've got absolute confidence in this squad in this season because we can do that with Arsenal.
When you talk about narrative, I think as well around this time, it was a great response to going to Old Trafford, which before kick-off, we all thought Sunderland were going to pick up a result. And then we lost. So we all did have to just check ourselves and say, if we got a bit ahead of ourselves, we were trying to run before we can walk. But in the aftermath of that, we picked up a few results. You will have touched on that in the episode 1, I'm sure. And yeah, so to play against Arsenal and say, no, we are good enough to compete against the very top teams was a big calling card from Sunderland. The other thing at this point that was really, really encouraging, we'd gone behind against Everton and got a point. I think we'd gone behind against Villa and been 10-man down. Being a man down, only had 10 men and fought back to get a point.
Being 10 men down would have been pretty tricky.
Yeah, no wonder it took you however long it did to review the first part of the season.
We're still getting a point.
Yeah. So again, this was another thing. We weren't just competing against the top teams. We were coming from behind to get points and get results. And that's something that happened throughout the season and really showed the intensity and the hunger in the squad.
Yeah. And just a couple of things on this as well. That just on your point, Martin, about Lafay with his mistake for Arsenal's first, for their equaliser. The fact that he was on the left-hand side at this point and he was coming in to try and get some of the ball in central areas. But he was picking it up in bad areas because he wasn't playing centrally. So he was kind of wandering in from that left-hand side. The other thing was the confidence, because we ended up being a bit blasé in this game because we gifted Arsenal a way back into the game because we were the better side at that point. And in the end, it was the first time that Arsenal had conceded 2 goals this season. We pretty much doubled the amount of goals that they'd conceded and had Arsenal pinned in at the time. Dan Ballard got man of the match, of course, and a fantastic opening goal and a fantastic performance from Ballard. And I thought he was fantastic up to this point, but he was a bit in and out, I think, going back through it. And I think this one was his first real kind of performance where he really stood out. And I think being on TV, I think a lot of people took notice of Dan Ballard. But moving on, and I'm going to come to you, Martin, with this because this was a fantastic 2 weeks, I remember, because we went into this international break that followed in 4th place in the table. So we kept staring at the league table thinking we were in a Champions League place for 2 weeks. We were kind of celebrating it and just basically just basking in. Normally we hate international breaks on our way to the podcast, but this season they haven't been too bad because we've been able to stare at the table for a couple of weeks and be happy. But during this international break, Martin, I don't know if you remember, there was a French TV documentary where Xhaka compared Lebris to Arsene Wenger, and it was big news during this international break. And then the first questions in the build-up to the next game against Fulham started to contain questions about AFCON. That was basically the big topic of the time. We went into this Fulham game, as we said, we were unbeaten in 4 games, 2 wins and 2 draws off the back of that fantastic moment against Arsenal. And the next game is Fulham, and Lebris keeps the same side for the 4th game in a row. And then we come out with probably the worst performance of the season. And it's, again, going back through some of my notes of this game, I've got lack of urgency. There's no complaints. And then it all kicked off after the final. We showed more intensity after the final whistle when it kicked off than we did at any point during the 90 minutes. But it was just a real strange one as we were on a high for that 2 weeks. And then the Fulham game happened.
No, it was. And, I said about the Arsenal game, you're watching that and you get that confidence that, right, we can compete. And you watch this game and go, maybe we're lacking something over here. Because when we'd broken the season down, we kind of looked at it as this was almost the start of part 2. So you had this first chunk of the season, which was obviously broken up by that international break that you referred to. But this part of the season now, we're getting into the end of November, start of December. We know that the fixtures start coming around thick and fast at this time of year in English football anyway, but we knew that the players would be departing to AFCON. So you're looking at this spell going, okay, how are we going to kick this off? How are we going to start this spell while we still have all our players still in the building? And we're also starting to get to the point of a couple of players being on the verge of bans as well, weren't we? I know we carried certainly Siddiqui and Xhaka through until the deadline for suspension. We kind of passed that without them getting suspended. But there was a few, I think, even at this point, I might be wrong, but I'm sure Xhaka was on 4 yellow cards at this point, and one more would have seen him banned for a game. So we were kind of balancing that in this run as well. But this was it was just an insipid performance. And you're looking back at the recent run now, and you're going, well, that first half against Everton was awful. This whole game, we just pretty much didn't look at the races. And to be fair, I don't think Fulham were very good on this occasion either. I think a goal, either team could have got a goal and won it. But it was, on the day, it was 2 poor sides. And we came out on the negative side of it. And obviously, it all kicked off after the match. And you kind of going, yeah, where was that urgency? Where was that fight for the 90 minutes or so that preceded it? But I can't remember what happened for their goal. There was some controversy around. I remember we had Tom White on the podcast the day after, and he'd been at the match, and he said there was a real controversy over the throw-in that led to Fulham's goal. And I can't quite recall the details of it, but basically Fulham got a throw-in that they shouldn't have got, and ended up or a free kick. It was throwing a free kick, and anyway, they obviously end up scoring. Jimenez, who I think is a really good striker, got the goal for them with about 5 or 6 minutes left, didn't he? But yeah, it was just a disappointing game, and that was just one of those where you're looking for somebody to provide a spark. And when you look at the team we had out, it's, bar Alderete, it's a full strength side really for what we had. Obviously, Robbie was still on the bench at this point. Isidore was starting up front, but you've got Ballard was playing, Hertraud was playing, Mukiele was playing, Ronaldo was playing, Treyun was in the team. Isidore was up front, Siddiqui, Lafay. It wasn't as if we were missing a few players for whatever reason. And I think this is something we're going to have to, we'll get increasingly used to it next season with the amount of travel that's going to be going on. But I think it's easy for us to look at things just in a Sunderland prism, isn't it? And these players have all been off. I'm sure it was the World Cup playoffs, so it was the last round of games to qualify for the World Cup.
Yeah.
So there's pretty intense football going on for a lot of these players in between these 2 games, the Arsenal and Fulham games. So you can often underestimate that, can't you, as a fan, because you're just looking at your own concern. Obviously, that's Sunderland for us. But we had a lot of players in the national duty. They came back, and for whatever reason, we just weren't at the races that day.
Yeah. Yep, exactly what I've got in my notes. As I said, I've just said it was just one of those games, and it was a late goal in the 83rd minute. And again, looking back at what I wrote at the time, I was saying that Hume didn't do enough to stop the cross, and I think Ballard played the man instead of the ball, apparently waiting for Roofs to come and collect. But like I said, it was the same team for the 4th game in a row, and then we went into the next game, which was Bournemouth at home. I think we were looking for a little bit of reaction. So Lebris made a couple of changes. Hume and Kutruda came out, and Alderete and Talby came in. I think Lebris was looking to get a little bit more energy into the side, freshen it up a little bit. But comedy of errors for the first goal. When we went behind early on, I think it was only after 6 minutes, and then we were 2 down after 14 minutes. And then there was a penalty on the half-hour mark that got us back into it. And I think it was, looking back, I think it was Enzo Lafay who scored that penalty. And, we equalised just after half-time and got back into it, and then ended up nicking it towards the end, Andrew. But we kind of needed this result because, the Fulham game was poor, as was said. Everton was a bit wobbly. Arsenal, we had to be at the top of our game. So that momentum of that Chelsea game was starting to get, it looked like it was a distant memory if we didn't pull out a result, and it looked awful after 15 minutes.
It did. It was not a happy scene at all. What I would say about that though is, I don't think the players themselves ever looked too distressed by it. Their response suggested that they were fully prepared and knew what to do. But yes, at that point, 2-0 down after 15 minutes, you could have expected things to very quickly turn south. I think as well because of the nature of the goals. The goal at Fulham was avoidable. The 2 goals we'd conceded in this game, they were down to errors from us as much as anything else. I think the second one, they scored from long range, but it was after we'd messed up a set play routine, I think, and they nicked the ball off us and broke away. So, yeah, had that been a different Sunderland vintage, that could have then snowballed and ended up being a real tricky period for us. But give the fans their dues. I think I said this in one of the top 10 moments pods. The fans have seen this team enough now to know that, let's just stick with them. Let's just back them. Let's do our side of things. And then the team came through. The equaliser from Traore was nicely timed, I felt. Getting back into the game so quickly was always good, because the longer you're 2-0 down, the harder it is to come back. I think it was only 10, 15 minutes, you said there, Chris, before the Lafay penalty. But Traore equalising so quickly after the break was important. I think that knocked the stuffing out of Bournemouth, because they perhaps thought, ride out 15 minutes in the second half and we've got this, we've got the win in the bag. But this was something we saw a few times. Martin's mentioned it against Everton. We often have a really bright start in the first 5 minutes after half time. In fact, it was the same at Fulham. I remember after an iffy first half against Fulham, we came out and that was our best period. So you have to assume there's a deliberate tactic there. Maybe they've crunched the numbers. Maybe that's a good time to get at a team when they've just come back from the half-time break. So yeah, equalising when we did was crucial. And from that point onwards, just the confidence was back. Everybody was behind the team. It was a good goal from Broby. It was a header. And we don't see, I think it was a header anyway. You don't see many headers from him, but just a fantastic recovery. And if you compare it to previous Sunderland eras, not something we did very often, to come from 2 behind and do it so matter of fact and just make it look as if it's not a problem. It spoke volumes about the character of the team.
Yeah, but certainly did, and it could have all gone wrong. Talking about sliding doors moments after we did equalise, there was a big scare because Bournemouth had a goal disallowed a minute after we pulled one back, or we got back into it on level terms just after half time. I think it was offside. Semenyo and Evan Nilsson, and again we were celebrating VAR. Just to go through Martin's editorial the other week.
I tell you what, as well, in this game, and it's a little bit of context. I don't just sit and watch Sunderland highlights all day, every day. But before my lad goes to bed, he goes, "Can we just watch the highlights from one game every night?" So we'll watch a different game every night. And last night we were watching the Bournemouth game. That's never a penalty on Ronaldo. Like the penalty that we get, that Lafay scores, I'd be furious if that got given against us. Ronaldo wins that one rather than it being a foul. So there's a couple of scores there that we may have just got away with it in this game.
Yeah, again, looking back, I put clumsy tackle, but Ronaldo won penalty. So that was how I summed it up. I was with my Sunderland specs on. And, hats off to you, Martin, where most parents are reading their kids a bedtime story, you stick a Sunderland game on. Absolutely
Oh
brilliant.
no, it's all educational. That's right.
Well, moving
Certainly
on.
well.
Moving on, we then had a midweek game and we travelled to Anfield. And at this point, we were 2 places and 1 point above them in the table. And I think, again, some changes from Regis Labris, Che Hume and Brian Brobby came in. Isidore and Traore came out. And I'm pretty sure this was Brian Brobby's first start for Sunderland. And when you consider that he made his debut way back in, let's see when it was, 13th of
Palace, wasn't
September. Yeah, 13th of September away to Crystal Palace. He had to wait some time for his debut. But I'll come to you on this one, Martin, because we were at it from the off. I remember Trey Hume crashed a shot off the bar for around 30 minutes in, and I was kind of like, bloody hell. Liverpool fans had quietened down, didn't really know what had hit them. Fantastic performance, and we deservedly took the lead through Talby, and Lafayette was the architect for that one. But I remember Curtis Jones came on as sub and made the difference for Liverpool, and Wirtz equalised with 10 minutes left. But we could have nicked it then in the 93rd minute, Martin.
Yeah, it was like, and Smith must score, wasn't it, from the 80s Cup final references? There you go. This is a really interesting game because when Alderete came out the team injured for the Chelsea game, we went to a back 5, and it very much was a back 5, although there was a little bit of variation there, but it was a back 5. And we kept that back 5 for Everton, Arsenal, and Fulham games as well. And I think we might have gone back to a 4 for Bournemouth. This game, he brought Trey Hume back in, as you say, but he put Trey Hume on the right-hand side of midfield. And that was the first time that we'd seen Hume really line up like that. And look, it alternates, doesn't it, between a 5 and a 4, and it's obviously something that worked on training. We saw it a lot more throughout the course of the season. This was the first time that we kind of saw that kind of evolved from a back 5 into a 4 in possession and maybe a 5 out of possession. But yeah, Trey Hume was lining up on the right-hand side of midfield, and as you say, he hit the bar pretty early on. There was a bit of fun, wasn't it? Because Wirtz obviously hadn't scored for Liverpool yet, and although he did have the shot that equalised, I think it got given to as a Mukiele own goal, didn't, so he had to wait a little longer for his first Liverpool goal. But you talk about the Talby goal, which is a great strike on his right foot from that position. We saw later on in the season cutting inside from the left and having a shot. But this is one of the only times I can remember him really having to go from outside the box from a right position, a position on the right-hand side. He was a little bit reluctant to do that at other points. You've got the Isidore incident, which, again, we talk about moments that define players in the Briss's mind. And we talked about the Mayenda miss at Burnley earlier in the season on the first pod, didn't we? And Mayenda didn't really get much of a chance after that. I think, regardless of what the Bristol say, this made his mind up pretty quickly about Isidore as a striker to rely on at this level. Not necessarily as a player to have around the squad and to bring on to cause trouble, but to rely on to get that goal when the chance presents itself. You've got to take that chance, and unfortunately Wilson Isidore didn't. The highlight of this game for me, though, was Luke O'Nien. Luke O'Nien made his first Premier League appearance coming off the bench in the last minute. What a place to do it. It didn't go too well for him a few years later, but this was a lovely moment for Luke O'Nien, wasn't it? And, after everything he'd been through with Sunderland, as an experience, and look, he's probably bettered it in his own enjoyment, in his own mind later on in the season, but that moment was pretty special, I think, for everybody who has backed Luke O'Nien all the way through his Sunderland career.
Absolutely. And a couple of quick points about that Liverpool game. I just wanted to mention for that Isidore chance, Robin Roofs was absolutely fantastic, where he actually hit it on the half volley and kind of curled it into Isidore's path. It was a fantastic distribution from Roofs to get the ball up to Isidore. The other thing was Jamie Carragher after the game. We dominated the game, could have nicked it in the 93rd minute with a gilt-edged chance. Jamie Carragher on Sky then turned around and said it was a great point for Sunderland. Brilliant. Thanks for that, Jamie. Appreciate it, man. But anyway, I think that's a good chance for us to take a quick break. So we'll be back very soon. And welcome back to How We're the Podcast. And we've just finished our trip to Anfield with a Jimmy Carragher quote saying that we did well to get a point in that game. Again, thank you very much for that. But we get into the next game, Manchester City away. Just very quickly on this, Andrew, because look, Manchester City were very Manchester City on this day. But actually, there was a late injury to Ronaldo just before the game, and Gertrude came back in. We were actually the better side, I think, for the first half an hour. But then it very quickly got away from us. And then if we thought 09 was giddy to play at Anfield, he was very giddy to play at the Etihad, wasn't he?
He got the ball, as I remember. Yeah,
Which goal though?
yeah, it was a bit of a wild one from him. I'm not happy that I've been given the 3-0 defeat to talk about. We've had so many positives we could have focused on, and this one's landed on me.
I'll skip over it and I'll give you the next one.
No,
Hey, actually, you know what? I'm just looking at the fixtures, right? And if we keep alternating, you've got Man City getting beat 3-0. You got a 0-0 draw at Brighton. You've got a 0-0 draw at Man City, a 3-0 away defeat to Brentford, and 3-1 away at West Ham. So we might have to share the load, Andrew, here.
Come on then, get this 3-0 over with, and you can talk about the Mags.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. I think the fact the Mags game was coming up did impact this game, because in the last 20 minutes, there'd been this concern about, is Xhaka going to be suspended? The game was up with about 20 minutes to go, so he came off, and that was almost a sign as if we weren't putting up the white flag as such, but this was a day we could afford to move on from quickly. I think the fact that Hume got moved to left back at short notice was important and did have an impact, because that Liverpool game was the first time, I think, where we'd seen him in that hybrid role. And I seem to think he either had a long range effort that hit the bar or the keeper needed to save. So it perhaps did impact how we played against Man City. This was at a time as well when everybody thought December was going to be a write-off for us. Everybody was saying, oh, you've got the top teams to play now. You've got lads away on AFCON. You might as well not bother turning up against any of these sides. The difference in this game for me was, whereas Liverpool needed a helping hand ever so slightly to equalise, as I recall it, Man City just scored 3 really good goals that they could have scored against anybody. And you don't like losing. It wasn't the best of afternoons, but it was one we could, you know, in our minds, we could at least just understand it and move on from fairly quickly.
Yeah, I tell you what, I wish I had a memory like yours, remembering that Trey Hume shot that crashed off the post. I tell you what, impressive memory you've got there, Andrew. But anyway, I will go to you for the next game, Andrew, because it was Newcastle at home, and Ronaldo was back in the side. We, of course, wanted to bounce back after that defeat against Manchester City. A lot of emotion around the game regardless, because we're playing Newcastle United. But it was sad news because Gary Rowell had passed away the day before the game. And then this game was exactly 50 years to the day since his debut. So, of course, huge emotion around playing Newcastle in general, and the Gary Rowell, Gary Rowell passing away added to all of it. But just in terms of the context of the season, Andrew, because we've talked a lot about when we've reviewed this game and moments of the season, the emotion that went into behind it. But when you look at what had come before, we'd won 1 in the last 6. And okay, we were still 7th in the table, I think, and we were kind of getting very giddy still because we were higher than where we expected. But this was still a big game to get points in, because we were in and around the middle of the table with Newcastle. They were in a very similar position, and having won 1 in the last 6, it was important. Actually, we got 3 points in this game.
It was important, and as you look back now, there was lots of times like that where had the result gone differently, you could very easily see the mood changing quickly. Yet every time we came up with one of those challenges, we responded well. That's the whole mental strength of Sunderland's squad at the moment is being one of our biggest plus points. But yes, it was important that we won. Putting aside the rivalry, just purely in terms of our Premier League season and how things were going, it was a great time to win. And then when you add on the fact that it was a supercharged atmosphere, it was a very emotional atmosphere because of the Gary Rowell news, because of who the opposition were and how long since we'd last played them on a even kind of like on an even standard. So there was a lot riding on the game, but in truth, it was fairly comfortable, wasn't it? I don't think Newcastle particularly troubled us. There were not many occasions where we were under the cosh. This, if you were viewing this just as a neutral, was just a, a, a good team with a good home record doing enough to beat a side who were in and around them in the table.
Yeah, I remember Gary Neville being very surprised that Newcastle basically gave us so much respect that they just backed off us in that game and allowed us to have most of the ball. And it didn't really look like they wanted to attack at all. They turned up to get a goalless draw. But going into the next game, Martin, of course, on the back of
You've got to let me talk about beating the Mags. Come on. Bloody hell.
No, because you've got all the good games. But go on, Martin, because look, it was a crap game, wasn't it? If we're completely honest and take our, rose-tinted specs off, it was a crap game. But it was one of those games, we did it a few times this season where we dominated without creating too much.
Nah, fantastic game. And look, I think the thing with this, you've got all of the shit that Newcastle supporters have given Sunderland supporters over the last 10 years. Oh, we've got Lionel Messi cleaning our boots and all this, man. This is just perfect.
I thought he was making the team. Was he cleaning the boots? I can't remember. Can't remember that verse.
He's probably doing all sorts. Lionel down in St James's, probably sweeping the carpets now. He won't be cleaning the trophy cabinet, will he? This was just perfect on so many levels, right? You couldn't have scripted it better. Look, as a game, it was tight, and I think it was the sort of game that we like in a lot of respects. I think we approached it as if we were facing the top 5 or 6 side at home at that stage of the season, because that's what we were kind of expecting. As it turns out, we were facing a very ordinary mid-table side at home. So maybe we paid them a little bit too much respect. But I think you saw from the outset our determination and our levels of drive and commitment compared to theirs. I remember very early on in the game, I think did Alanga try to take somebody on? He forgot to take the ball with him, and there's the 50 million quid super signing. You had Anthony Gordon running the ball out on the left-hand side. He must have been concentrating on practicing the Spanish in his head during the game rather than concentrating on the football. And then
you had Michele on Dan Burn.
You got the Michele challenge on Dan Burn, which just fantastic. Like typified what a derby should all be about. And all of our players got what the derby was about. All of our players understood how much it meant to the supporters. And I genuinely don't think you can say the same to the opposition's players on that day. You've had all this narrative coming from north of the Tyne about how much money you spend. Oh, you're going to be in serious financial trouble next year, blah, blah, blah. If you look at, who's it, Alanga, and the lad who scored our goal, St. Nick, it was time for the season for it, wasn't it, from deliver a present. The two of them cost pretty much more than we'd spend all season anyway. So it just goes to show that, money doesn't buy you success. It doesn't buy you intelligence. It doesn't guarantee you anything. You've got to do things in the right way. And it was just such a stark contrast in how Sunderland was being run off the field in terms of recruitment and getting the players with the right character and all that sort of stuff versus that lot. And it was so glorious to watch it unfold. So glorious to watch it unfold. And it was topped off by us taking that photo at the end, which I just thought, in terms of beautiful pettiness, wins the league of beautiful pettiness, because it was superbly orchestrated. And you know what? It was just
chuck the scoreboard in there as well.
this. Oh man, and that, the whole thing was perfect, wasn't it? You had the visitors up on the scoreboard. You couldn't put the opposition names up on the scoreboard at that stage. So I think they've got a new scoreboard, installed some new software after that game, so you could put the opposition names and badges on, couldn't you? But just the levels of it showed from top to bottom that the football club understood what this game meant. You had Eddie Howe on the sideline looking just completely baffled and bewildered, and the British just picking him off, and it was superb. It was superb. And I think, because we obviously won, not want to give anybody any spoilers, but because we won down at their place later on in the season, this game might get overlooked because it was an own goal. And it was a bit of a shame. While it was great, it was an own goal by the multi-million-pound striker. It was a bit of a shame that one of our lads didn't get a cracker to win it. So maybe because of that, this game doesn't get the same amount of joy as the reserve reverse fixture. I had magmates texting us going, and I know it's my own fault for having magmates, but they were texting us going, "Oh, it was just two shit sides, wasn't it?" I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was one good side and one really shit side, and I'll let you decide which one was which.
Well, you say it gets overlooked, but I'm not sure there's been a chant sang more than the Voldemort one since then. So the other thing as well, I just want to emphasise Andrew's point as well, because actually it was quite a slow tempo game in general, but we dominated possession. But actually we did that thing where we came out after half time and stepped it up for a couple of minutes straight after the break, and that's where the goal came from. I think we hadn't put a cross in virtually. People had been saying one thing that the first half was missing was us getting the ball into the box. Come out after the break, get the ball wide. Michaelia, first thing he does, gets the ball into the box, and God knows why the hell Voldemort was there. Probably thought he was so crap up front. Look, have 5 minutes at the back. Just to...
Alderete clapped. Remember, Alderete clapped as well, which was brilliant.
Yeah.
Voldemort has forgotten we've changed ends. So he's stayed kicking the other way. It's like our coach an under 14s team had the question the other day, which way are we kicking now? It was like that.
Yeah. And we've got Gav with us. And just at the risk of extending this pod by another hour, mate, we are just into beating the Mags at home, and I'm not sure I can move on without handing it over to you for a second.
Well, I've came in at the perfect time, haven't I?
Yeah.
Hey, Newcastle at home. What a game. I mean, we've said a lot about this game, haven't we? And a lot more can be said. And I think it's probably going to be one of those that lives long in the memory. There's not been many home wins against Newcastle over the years. I mean, certainly most of them have come in, the last 15 years or so. But the feeling I had leaving that ground that day was up there with some of the best ever. And it wasn't even a particularly thrilling game. It wasn't the game wasn't the reason why it was so good necessarily. It was just getting one over on them after years of being tortured by them for being shite.
Just one question on it then, Gav. In terms of home wins against the Mags, does this top the lot? Because there's obviously the Richardson one, which is a big one.
I'm at risk of probably contradicting myself because I'm sure at some point we've done a Derby Day top 10 or something. I might have voted something else above it. The Richardson one always stood out for me because it was special the way that we won it. But I just thought this was better from the minute, people lined the streets to get into the ground to the way that they presented things on the screens, calling them the visitors, not reading the teams out. And everything about the day was just brilliant. It was like we were announcing, we aren't your inferior anymore. We aren't your noisy little neighbour down the road who never achieves anything and will never ever be on the level of Newcastle United, this Saudi-backed super club that everyone's expecting to rock the world. Well, we pissed off for 10 years, came back and took the mick out of them, didn't we? And it was just special. Yeah, like I say, as a game, Chris, it wasn't a special game. It wasn't a great game of football, but it didn't need to be, because they were that bad that we didn't have to get out of first gear. And we knew that, and they knew that. And after the game, I don't think other than like the odd mag going, "Oh, two poor teams," to make themselves feel better, I don't think too many of them were actually in a position to try and say anything other than they were absolutely awful. And it was just a really nice one to rub back in their faces after all them years.
Yeah. Well, I had the chance. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know which way to put it, but had to go on the Wayne Rooney show after this game with a Newcastle fan, and he said pretty much that it was two poor sides, and I was like, well, Newcastle just didn't even look like they wanted to win it, and went backwards and forwards a little bit, but got a chance to rub it in after the game a little bit. But anyway, 10 minutes ago, I nearly moved on to the Brighton game, but in fact, now we're going to going to do that. Because Andrew, I'm going to come to you. Look, Brighton away, but I just wanted to, on this, in the build-up to this game, Regis was confirmed that all the players had left for AFCON except for Habib Diarra, who was apparently it needed for him to play a part in this game to complete his rehab. So he went off to AFCON. So in the build-up, he was talking up chances of players coming in. And a lot of people thought Dan Neil would come in, and Gertruida got the nod in midfield. And Diarra again came on as a sub. I think he came on for the last 25 minutes or so just to finish that rehab before AFCON. But I think for me, there was three changes. Gertruida, Rig and Adingra came in. Of course, Siddiqui, Talbi, Ronaldo came out with the changes for AFCON. This was the first, everybody been talking about it, building it up so much. And then when it came round, I mean, there was two things for me. One, it didn't seem that big. Of course, big players, but it showed what good squad we had. And I thought this was really kind of signal the end for Dan Neil.
Yeah, it probably did. It probably did. That was an aspect I'd forgotten about this. But yeah, all the talk and the build up to AFCON was the side's going to be decimated, and we're going to have to name a starting 11 that was more familiar from the Championship. I think we're all expecting Dennis Serkin to get a lot of minutes around this point as well. But yeah, you're spot on. Dan Neil still wasn't anywhere near the starting 11, which if he couldn't have forced his way into the thinking then, the question has to be, well, when can he? And it's not because Dan Neil isn't a capable player. It's because of that thing you said. It's because by this point, we knew that we had a really strong squad. Brilliant starting 11 and plenty of players waiting in the wings to try and come along. Adingra hadn't been playing too much prior to that, and his inclusion was a little bit of a surprise. And you talk, Chris, about how this might have been a judgment day for Dan Neil. I think it was perhaps a bit of a judgment day for Adingra as well, against his former club. Not the easiest of circumstances, but I don't remember him ripping any trees up in this game. I think he was average. Yeah, well, I was going to say average at best, but fair play, Martin. If you remember it better than me, I'm not going to disagree with that. So there might have been decisions made on one or two players around this point. The thing that stands out to me, though, about this scoreline was, I think it was very similar to that Fulham match in terms of pattern. There wasn't a lot happening. The only difference was we tightened up ever so slightly, didn't concede a late winning goal from the opposition. So suddenly the discourse has changed completely. You can have two very similar performances, and it all boils down to one moment. And this performance gets remembered perhaps as being a million times better than the Fulham game, when reality they weren't too far apart. It was just that in those crucial moments we were ever so slightly tighter and maybe a little bit fresher because we had made a couple of changes.
Yeah. And then we, of course, we all then went to stuff our face over the Christmas period, and we returned on the 28th of December at the Stadium of Light to take on Leeds. There's two things about this I wanted to raise with you, Martin, because on the night Leeds were pretty impressive and maybe got a bit we were maybe a bit fortunate when we took the lead on the half hour through a Dingra. But there was, and then Calvert-Lewin equalised with a good move just after the break, but Leeds were good on the night. But two things about this, Martin, I wanted to raise. It was a first start for Dennis Sergan. It was his Premier League debut in those terms. And, of course, news as we're recording that he has confirmed that he's leaving Sunderland. And I don't think he let the side down, and this was his Premier League debut. And the other thing, we mentioned the Dingra, this was his big moment in a Sunderland shirt. And I think a lot of people thought it might kick on after this.
No, that's right. I think the context of Dingra is important here as well, isn't it? Because he'd obviously been left out of AFCON and he'd been expecting to go, but because he hadn't been in the Sunderland side a great deal, he'd got left out of his national team. So you were really hoping that he would take this with a point to prove rather than being pissed off because he hadn't been given the opportunities and consequently missed out on selection for AFCON. This game was an interesting one because you're looking at our bench. You know, we talked about the team that we had and the players that were missing. Serkin's coming. I'll come back to Serkin as well because I think he played well in this game. I think he played brilliantly in one of the games I followed against Man City. But he came back into the side. And the starting 11 for all intents and purposes looks a strong starting 11. But you look on the bench, you know, Jensen Jones, Leo Hielder, Dan Neil, Harrison Jones, Chutarov was on the bench. You know, you're really getting down to the scraping the barrel, I guess, is, I'm trying to be polite about it. You're getting to last options, aren't you, really, when you're naming those sort of players on the bench for a Premier League game. But I thought we actually started off well in this game. We took the lead with a great goal from Dingra, and like you, I thought this is the moment that really sparks him into life. He's got a clean run at the side. He's got guaranteed starts for the next little while. He can really, get that bit between his teeth and make a real impression and show everybody what he's got. But I think this little spell did for him because, as we've talked about with other players, and especially in that Brighton game that Andrew was talking about before, I remember Lebris being really frustrated with him not tracking back. And I don't think he's gone off a Dingra. Obviously, he's gone to Monaco, and I think there's a fee agreed now, isn't there, with them? But I don't think he's gone off a Dingra for the job he does going forward. It's because he can't trust him going backwards. And I think that's what he was hoping to kind of get with him, and he just didn't. But the big turning point in this game was Joe Rodon getting injured after half an hour. Leeds had, obviously everyone's talked about this ever since the time it happened, and it's been earmarked as the moment of the season. That's why Daniel Parker's got some nominations for Manager of the Year, and Regis Lebris hasn't, because he went to 5 at the back at some point, which is obviously revolutionary and only the very best managerial tacticians could ever think of. But he'd gone to 5 at the back, and he'd gone to 5 at the back in this game. Rodon went off, and they had to revert to a 4. And after they reverted to a 4, they were loads better against us. And I think we were pretty fortunate to get in still 1-0 up. And in the second half, they were the better side. I think that second half performance that they put in was one of the best performances we saw from an opposition team at the Stadium Light. I thought they were excellent. And, Calvert-Lewin's goal was a lovely move, wasn't it? It went from our box. I think we maybe overcommitted and got caught out on the break. They still had an awful lot of work to do and did it well.
Arguably the best goal we conceded all season, that. It was
Quite,
brilliant.
Yeah.
It was back
in terms of a
front,
team goal,
yeah,
absolutely just ripped us apart. And I think we were fortunate to get a point. But you're looking at this little run and going, you know what, I'm actually not bothered about performances at this point because we've depleted the squad, going away at AFCON, getting that point against Brighton, getting a point here. It's just another one, chuck it in the bag, tick it off, get on to the next game. And this was this spell of the season, wasn't it, where we just had to grind out results, keep the points total ticking over, with the hope that when we get players back, we certainly weren't in a worse position than we were when they left. And ultimately, this was a really good point for us because we probably would have not got any points out of it 8 times out of 10, I reckon.
Yeah. And we'll move on to the next game, Gav, which is the new year as well. It's 2026, 1st of January. It's New Year's Day. It's a Thursday. I'm not sure it matters too much around that time because everyone forgets what day it is anyway. But Manchester City visit the Stadium of Light, and Register Briss pulls a little bit of a rabbit out of his hat because Chris Rigg comes out and Eliza Mayenda comes in for this game, which I think surprised a lot of people. But, we did some top moments in our top moments pod, Gav, and we went through some games in this. This one kind of gets overlooked a little bit because it's goalless, but it's probably one of the performances of the season.
We were absolutely brilliant. Yeah. It was one of them games. I remember walking back over the town after the match, over Kiel Crossing, talking to a fella who was next to us, and it was like we'd won. We were absolutely buzzing with a 0-0 draw with Man City. We were excellent. I think because of AFCON, we'd built up a bit of a siege mentality about right, we are depleted and this is what we've got and we need to stick together. And I think we did kind of thrive on the idea that we were an underdog in a lot of these games. I mean, it was touched on briefly just there when we talked about the last game, but if you look at the bench options, we didn't have them. We didn't have options on the bench. We named 9 subs, but the likelihood of Lebris turning to more than 2 or 3 of them at a push was minimal. So you were talking about a very small squad playing against one of the best teams in the world, and it was Lebris at his best, really. Working with a small group of players up against the best coach in the world. And yeah, I think we could probably count ourselves as very, very unlucky we didn't win the game. I think around that time we were playing within ourselves a little bit through necessity. We couldn't. There's no way you could go and be really expansive against Manchester City, but we did what we were very, very good at in terms of being organised and winning the second balls and just not allowing them time to pull us to pieces really on the wings, which is when Man City are at their best. They're very good at slowing the game down, then upping the tempo significantly and just running through you. I mean, Erling Haaland just didn't get a sniff off Mukiele and Alderete. It was an absolute masterclass in defending. I don't think he touched the ball more than a couple of times. He was. The thing is as well, right? Is when you're playing against the best, I think you up your game significantly, don't you? You want to be as good as them, and certainly our top performers, they really did turn up on this night. So yeah, really, really pleasing game. I think had there been some goals, Chris, you're right. It probably could have featured on one of those lists of top games like we've done.
Yeah, it could have been up there. It was a fantastic performance. And Andrew, that led into our trip to Spurs. And we put out the same team as we put out against City. Dan Ballard actually returned on the bench for this game. But it looked like a 4-4-2 in this game. And I think in the first half, I remember because Spurs weren't looking in as much danger as they were later on. They were just on this downslide at this point, just falling into that trap. And I remember I've got a mate who supports Spurs who was at the game and he was texting me and he was saying that, and I agreed with him actually, that at half time we got away with it being just 1 down. But in the second half when we got that equaliser, I thought this was the first time we saw that connection between Enzo Lefebvre and Brian Brobby, and Brian Brobby looking to be on the shoulder. But a fantastic goal with Brian Brobby. And actually, maybe a finish we haven't seen as often as we maybe would have liked because, once he got sight of goal, he just smashed it in, didn't he?
He did. You're dead right, Chris, mate. It was a fantastic goal. I'm amazed we've got as far as January before using the term connection in a Sunderland season review because that was one of the buzzwords of the year. But it was a good goal, and it was important that we responded well in the second half because we had been a bit off colour. I just remember at this point, it was the same things being spoken about all the time. We were discussing how we didn't have many options on the bench. We were discussing how we were having to stick with roughly the same starting 11 or the same 12 or 13 players. The first half against Spurs, understandably so, given the Christmas period and it was a hectic run of fixtures, we were off colour. We looked a bit flat, and had Spurs been in a better position, yeah, they might have expected to have wrapped things up by half time, but just Sunderland never know when they're beaten. They always get a second wind. They always come back. And if my memory serves me correctly, I think we were the better team in the second half, and a point was the least we deserved. Just like so many other games, every test that Sunderland had, we came through. Going away from home, being 1-0 down, perhaps feeling leggy, Sunderland would have lost that game 9 times out of 10 in the past, whereas now we've come to expect more from them. Quality goal, as you say, and it just takes a while to get your head around it, but this is what you need to do to finish in the top half of the Premier League. Just keep going, never give up, and see where it gets you.
Yeah, well, this was our 4th draw in a row at Spurs. So we beat the Mags and then drew at Brighton. We drew at home to Leeds and Man City, and then we drew away to Spurs. So we got 4 points across those 4 games. And talking about this pattern, Martin, we go away to Brentford on the 7th of January. Andrew's just described a pattern of game there. At Brentford, Ballard was back in the side, and we had a really poor first half. Brentford took the lead on the half hour with an absolutely mess of a goal from our point of view. But second half, came out and we were the better side, and then we were awarded a penalty on the hour, and Enzo Lafay stepped up, and then decided to do a Panenka. It didn't quite go as to plan. And then a few minutes later, a Getrauda error led it to being 2-0, and then the third came 10 minutes later. But again, Martin, Andrew described that pattern of staying in a game and then being the better side later on and nicking it or getting that point. And, we could have easily been celebrating 3 points at Brentford had that Panenka going in.
Yeah, the game against Crystal Palace I followed the week after was an excellent win, wasn't it? 2-1, Enzo Lafay, Brian Brobby. Fantastic.
Keep it in order.
Fantastic
Keep it in order.
comeback. Oh, sorry. Oh, you really want me to talk about the Brentford game? Look, it's moments, isn't it? And, people criticise Lafay for that penalty. I didn't, because he was doing the best thing he thought, or he was doing what he thought was best to score a goal in that situation, wouldn't he? And I'm not going to criticise anything for Enzo Lafay ever. So, it was one of those things, wasn't it? We had, again, we've had a few times during the course of the season, when we look back on the whole season, and we talk about being such a good season, overall it was. That doesn't mean to say there wasn't moments in the season that we played badly, we played poorly, we did things that we shouldn't have done or would otherwise not have done. And the performance against Brentford, that was the game when you looked at that run of fixtures that we had. So we'll get through the Leeds game, get through the Man City game, get through the Spurs game, and then we got Brentford. That'll get us back on track. And maybe the players fell into that as well, where they thought that's going to be a slightly easier game in terms of intensity, in terms of quality, than certainly the Man City game was. The Tottenham game was difficult, as we've talked about. And we had the opportunity to get back into the game. And I think if we score that penalty, we probably go on to win that game. But the fact that we missed it, and, again, I'm not going to criticise the fair for the Panenka we took, but the fact that we missed that opportunity in such style completely deflated us, I thought. When you watch it, you can kind of almost physically see that momentum and that desire, not desire, that momentum, that confidence drain out the players. Because I think we showed the desire to get back into the game, and I still maintain if we score that penalty, we get something out of that game, if not win it. But it just flattened us, and from there on in, there was only one outcome, wasn't it? And look, Brentford are a good side. They proved it. They finished ahead of us this season. I think Thiago was one of the best strikers in the league. I think if he was playing for one of the top teams in the top 3 or 4, he'd be talked about worldwide. But, absolutely superb striker. And that was just one of those that you want to end as quickly as possible. You want to forget about as quickly as possible. And you don't really want to be talking about it in depth on the podcast 5 or 6 months later, do you? But thank you, Christopher. You've made me do so.
It probably does need to be kind of banged home a little bit, by the way. It was the 4th game in 10 days with that stretch squad. Like, it's...
No, that's right.
When we're just talking about the state of the bench over that kind of period where we were relying on... I mean, the impact players in that game were Sirkin, Mundell, Mayenda. We didn't have options, so that same 12 or 13 players were being asked to play every other day pretty much over that period. And it was one of them days, wasn't it, where it just, we made one big mistake, which Lefebvre did, and then very quickly felt the bits. But Brentford were very good at home this season. So, and particularly at that time, they were on a good run, weren't they, Brentford? They were doing pretty well. So, I was a bit pissed off at the time with Lefebvre's decision, but it didn't take as long to get my head around it and kind of think, it's just something that happens,
Yeah. Well, actually, I think it did us some good, Gav, the fact that the next game gave us a little break from the Premier League because, of course, we needed to travel to Everton for the FA Cup 3rd round, which was a tough draw that took us to Everton. And I remember, I'm sure it was me, Bomber, and maybe Andrew talking, maybe Johnny, I can't remember, before the game. We were talking about Anthony Patterson being in goal and, Lebris making 11 changes and all this sort of stuff. Not as much rotation as we thought when it came to the starting 11. Ended up being a poor game. The goal by Enzo Lefebvre was the first shot on target after the half hour. But we did let Everton get back into it because they didn't look like scoring, so we got a bit blasé with it. Shocking decision by the referee, give him a penalty with a few minutes to go. And then it needed extra time before we went through on penalties. But with all those games, Gav, we're probably glad that it didn't go to a replay.
Yeah, I think when I was talking there about the sheer volume of games, again, this one wasn't too far after that Brentford game, but we had 8,000 fans in the away end, and maybe that was what gave the players that little bit extra energy and motivation to get the job done, because it isn't often that you play in front of 8,000 of your own fans, and it was a new stadium for everybody there pretty much, so unless there'd been an Everton game or a different game that had been played there, so it was a novelty occasion really, wasn't it? And I actually had the feel of a proper FA Cup tie, because for me, we often get like a really naff tie, don't we? Like, will the draw be done? And you're always like, oh God, why? I wanted like a non-league team away or something, like, like it never seems to be us. But at least we got to visit a new ground with plenty of people in the away end. And I think that's probably what got us over the line. You see, it was a poor game. It wasn't great, but I still think we were the better team. And it was a nice goal that we scored. And it was a nice response from Lefebvre, wasn't it? Because he'd suffered a load of stick after that Brentford game online and stuff. And his response was just to put in a man of the match performance, scored a goal, apologised in the best possible way by putting it away, and then obviously scoring a penalty in the shootout, which he didn't, Penanga, which was nice.
Mm-hmm.
And a word on the decision to give the penalty to Everton. I watched that back again the other day when I was going over some clips and things. It beggars belief, really, but we came sort of used to that, didn't we, with referees and stuff. But the shootout will go down in history for me. I think that's arguably. Have we ever been better in a shootout than that?
No,
I can't have been,
not.
surely. Roof's saving every penalty and then sticking all three of ours away.
Wasn't it?
I mean, all of our penalties were great, but the one that won it from Luke O'Neill, that was. I mean, if there's one man you want stepping up to take a penalty, it's him, because you just know that he practices every day for no reason other than in case that happens. He's in training every day with the balls out, practicing probably with the young keepers and the young players. So he absolutely leathered it, and we got to celebrate that great moment in front of the away end. I mean, yeah, perfect. It gave me a bit of hope we were going to go on a run, because I thought that was a really tough test early in the tournament, and we passed it with flying colours ultimately.
Yeah, you're talking about good draws. What, like Port Vale away? Is that a good draw? Is it?
I said non-league.
Oxford.
Oxford, yeah. But anyway, moving on, and the next up in the Premier League, it was a week later, so we had a week off, Andrew, which was good. But we had Crystal Palace at home, and there was 4 changes made from that cup side. And one of the most controversial decisions was that Romain Mundle stayed in the side. He was getting a bit of a run in the side at the time. It was Robin Roofs' 23rd birthday on his 23rd appearance for Sunderland. And again, we're talking about this pattern, Andrew. We went behind on the half hour and needed. And I mean, we keep repeating ourselves all the time. We're going behind, great. But it was another fantastic response. Lefay got the equaliser, and fantastic. I remember fantastic word from Ballard on that goal, on that Lefay equaliser. And Brian Brobby got the goals. But this one was a big one coming after that defeat at Brentford, Andrew.
It was, and yes, we'd beaten Everton in the cup, but our previous win in the league, our previous 3 points had been a while away. So we always go back to momentum and that. We needed a win just to keep the mood up, keep the faith. That week off between Everton and this game must have been a godsend to that group. It was crucial because we were dead on our feet against Brentford, and then here we are for a very rare occasion. We dominated possession against Crystal Palace. There's not many times we did that in games. Looking at some stats now, we had like almost double the amount of passes played. So it was a different approach to some of those games across the Christmas period where we were just having to like dig in and scrap and get through. Whereas this one, we looked fresher. We had more of the ball. The timing of the equaliser, again, at the risk of repeating myself, was really important because it was only a few minutes after going 1-0 down. And that has been something that has struck me all season. Just, we never panic. It's almost as if conceding the goal's a good thing for Sunderland because we then play better afterwards. Just to get back level pegging so soon after was a positive. And the Crystal Palace game, the Wolves game, there's 1 or 2 in my mind. At home, they're just routine, solid wins. I don't remember there being any stories or any dramas in this game. We just got the job done, and then it was move on. And that is what you need. You need your home games against beatable opposition to just run smoothly. That's what we did. And I think one real big change for us, he was back at the Everton game when we expected him to be rested, having come back from AFCON, but having Siddiqui back was a huge positive for us and just gave us an extra element in midfield. And looking back on it now, we knew AFCON was going to be difficult, but we really did miss Siddiqui in particular. Him being back on the scene was huge for us.
I think as well, this game kind of signified how quickly we were progressing and improving. Because when you think back to the Palace game earlier in the season away from home, they were on a massive unbeaten run. We were relatively new to the Premier League, still finding our feet. And we had to, I remember coming away from that being absolutely buzzing with a point because Palace were on like this 15 or 16 game unbeaten run, had won trophies in that run. And then come to fast forward a little bit to this game, they were the kind of things that kind of petered out a bit for them. They found their level naturally, and we were soaring in terms of confidence and things like that, particularly in home games. And I just thought it was a point worth making that that by the point we got to this game, I think we'd really solidified ourselves in the league. And by the way, Brobby was unbelievable in this game as well. He pulled their defenders all over the place and left. You'll never get the assist for it, but when he leaves the ball to run through to Lefay, it was just beautiful forward play. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things before we leave the Palace game. The first being that Remy Matthews was on the bench for Crystal Palace that day, which is potentially worth mentioning. The other one, Andrew mentioned passing, that we had 59% possession on that day against Crystal Palace. There were only 2 games in the season in the Premier League where we had more possession. One was Everton at home. Can anyone guess the other one? Quick guess?
Newcastle?
Everton away or Chelsea at home?
No.
Not the Mags, no?
No.
Oh.
Look at Chris.
The
Got
other
a right
one.
smirk on his face.
The other one was Nottingham Forest at home, where we got beat 5-0, which I thought was worth mentioning. But anyway, we go into the next game, which is a trip to the Big Smirk. We're going to take West Ham United away from home, who are in trouble. It's our first game without Granit Xhaka, and Mayenda comes back into the side, playing close to Brian Brobby. Was mentioned it in January that Labris tried this one. Mundell is still in the side as well, but it's 3-0 at half-time, Martin. Again, I'm giving you the really good games this season at the moment, but
Shouldn't have mentioned anything earlier, should I? I was on a really
exactly,
good roll.
you shafted yourself here. But Michele wasn't happy being subbed, and then Xhaka tried to have a scrap with the whole stadium. But it wasn't a good day, was it?
No, this was one of the worst days of the season, I think, just in terms of how everything kind of played out. And it started off, didn't it, with the news that Xhaka was injured and would miss the game. And we didn't really know how long he'd be out for, but there was rumours circulating that he'd be out for a significant period of time. The question then, of course, becomes who comes in to replace him. And we kind of shuffled things about, didn't we? And Trey Hume actually played as a very genuine right midfield. This was almost 4-4-2 with Mayenda up front alongside Brobby. And again, we talked about that Burnley game, that Mayenda missed that chance in the very start of the season. I think this is another game where if people go, why has Mayenda not been given more of a chance? Watch this game back. Because he looked lost. He looked as if he didn't really know what position he should be playing in. He wasn't getting back to doing defensive work. He wasn't getting up front and close to Brobby to work with him. And we just looked all over the place. I remember just before half time, I think we were already 2-0 down at this point. Reinildo, who'd already been booked, committed a really daft foul and probably should have got a second yellow card. And that would have just summed up that first half if he'd gone off, because we were just awful. We just couldn't do anything. We couldn't string passes together. Romain Mundell really struggled on the left-hand side, and it's going to be, you talk about Dennis Cirkin, obviously he's left the club, and I really wish he hadn't, because I think he potentially is a very good Premier League fullback. Romain Mundell has got a lot to prove, and I think he was given opportunities. I think Labris likes him. He gave him opportunities whenever he could, whenever he was fit, and he does do that defensive side of things well. He's got willingness to get back and defend. So it's going to be interesting to see how Romain Mundell is viewed, ahead of next season. But in this game, he really struggled, and he was in that first half. He was one of 11 who really struggled because we couldn't do a great deal at all. Made some subs at half time, and we looked better in the second half. We played relatively well. The goal that we scored was actually a fantastically good move. Mukiele went down the right, great cross into Brobby, who scored. But we've said on a couple of occasions this season, when we've gone behind by a number of goals and then played well after that's easy. That doesn't take courage or guts or anything to play well when you're 3-0 down. It's just a little bit of personal pride, really. And yes, we played well in that second half. It didn't count for anything because the game was done and dusted. As you say, Xhaka starts to have a fight with a man carrying a baby. I seem to remember, wasn't a fella carrying a small human, which made it all the more comical and just ridiculous to watch. And yeah, that was just one that you want to write off as soon as possible, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And you can tell it's bad when Regis Labris is making triple substitutions at half time. And there was obviously that was the day as well that West Ham fans were planning protests, and they were planning walkouts or not to turn up and all of this. And we thought we were going to go and steamroller them, and 3-0 down by half time. It was also the day that in commentary, Ali McCoish talked about being interviewed for the Sunderland job in 2017, which I found quite interesting on the commentary. I think it wasn't the best kept secret, but I think it was interesting to hear him confirm it. But Gav, I just wanted to bring on to you, obviously, that we'll get into our last game in a minute, but after this game, the January transfer window slammed shut. And for the West Ham game, Dan Neil wasn't even on the bench for that. So the rumour mill started about Dan Neil. There was, of course, the deals that saw Adingra leave. He was on the bench for that West Ham game. There was rumours what was going to happen with Romain Mundle, although Romain Mundle played against West Ham. We ended up bringing in Angulo and Joslan, but really strange January transfer window was one of them where I imagine if you were involved in the club, it's almost like, you're at the table in the casino deciding on whether to stick or twist, aren't you?
I think because we've been so active in the summer, it was difficult, really, and also there weren't any massive glaring weaknesses other than the wings, I would have said. I know a lot of people were saying, "Oh, we need a striker," but obviously the club had a lot of faith in Brobby's ability. Certainly after January, he was kind of held back to an extent, wasn't he? Allowed to get fit, allowed to get himself up to speed mentally and physically. So they obviously thought, no, we don't need a centre forward per se. We're going to persist with him. But when we got to January, it was a case of just, I think, anyways. Now looking back at the deals that we did, I think it was just a case of looking ahead slightly, maybe bringing in players who we felt it was a good time to sign them, who were maybe going to come on the radar of other clubs. I mean, you mentioned Joslan. He was all set to sign for Celtic, wasn't he? He was pretty much a done deal there, and then their fans kicked off because obviously he was coming in from an Israeli club, and that deal then didn't happen. We saw an opportunity and brought him to the club. The Elborg one, again, this is a lad who wasn't really in the Malmo first team, but had played in Europe and was starting to get noticed, and obviously that's where we'd seen him. So we thought, yeah, look, why not bring him in now? And then with Angulo, he's, again, from what I was told at the time when I spoke to Elijah Michels, who's the Belgian video scout, Belgian league video scout, he was telling me about Nilson Angulo. His underlying data is ridiculous in terms of defensive contributions. He was talking about how creatively he's only going to improve, but it's probably one of the strengths of his game. And he was basically talking about him as like, this is a player who is about to jump onto the radar of other clubs. So with all three deals, it was kind of, I think the club just saw an opportunity to get lads in maybe who are going to go on to be very good. And we've done that in the past with this regime as well. I think I've heard this said by people at the club, but if you're spending big on players in January and you're massively overhauling your squad in January, something's gone wrong in the summer. The bulk of your business should be done in the summer, which at that point we were flying really, and the squad was in a good place. It was improving every week. There was no need for us to go out and do anything drastic, unless the right player came up. And you might remember that Brennan Johnson, when he was available for transfer from Spurs, it was pretty much confirmed at the time, wasn't it, that we'd actually tabled a £35 million bid, but he chose to go to Palace instead. So, the money was there if we wanted to sign somebody and we felt it was the right deal. We just didn't feel that, other than a handful of players, the right deal was there. And to be fair, obviously now in the fullness of time, we can say we didn't need to go out and do anything drastic in January. We actually improved as the season went on. So, and it was about, obviously as well, Chris, it was about getting rid of players as well. So many went out. I think we got rid of quite a lot of the players who either signed in League One or just kind of after promotion to the Championship. Paveda was hanging around like a bad smell. We managed to get rid of him actually in March, but we were trying to get rid of him in January. Robertson or Shisha, I think, went on deadline day. Blondie Nanuka went out the door on a permanent. He was never going to play games. You know what I mean? Joe Anderson, another one who we'd signed in League One, who was nowhere near. Matete, I think, went in that window again, a player who was just part of that bomb squad, really was occasionally showing up in the 21s, and that's about it. So yeah, I think we just used that period, didn't we, to refine. We loaned a lot of players out. There's a lot I didn't mention there who went out in January. A lot of young players. Arthur Masuaku who left, that didn't work out. Dan Neil, who you mentioned before, he went to Ipswich. Adjilise went to Portsmouth, and unfortunately for him, picked up another injury, but quite possibly could have done quite well in the Championship if he'd stayed fit. Patterson went to Millwall to play a part in their promotion campaign. Dingra went to Monaco. Hjelde went to Sheffield United. So I think it was just about squad refinement. We'd made that many changes in the summer that the squad was bloated and we just had to get rid of players. And yeah, I guess in the fullness of time, I can sit back with me on the table with a cigar on and say they got it perfect.
Yep, they did. And just memories of Leo Hjelde being on the bench for 5 Premier League games this season for Sunderland, which we should mention now that you've said he's left at this point. But Andrew, our last game that we're going to cover in this part, we have Burnley at home next up. And after that performance against West Ham, Mayenda and Mundle do come out of the side. We're still without Xhaka. Diarra comes in for his first start after AFCON, comes in the middle of the park with Siddiqui, Lafay in front of them. We've got Human, Talby wide and Brobby up front. And, again, and we're going to finish, a bit of symbolism. We're going to end this part. You consider the end of the previous season, we finished so far behind Burnley. And actually, if you looked at the games, we were playing them as if, we were underdogs when we played them in the 2 games the season before, in some ways. Finished way out ahead of us. Then we come into the Premier League, we do our thing. And at this point, we just showed where we'd gone during this season compared to Burnley. Completely blew them away. Diarra unlucky not to get 2 goals. The first one was, I think, assigned as an own goal. But he was making those runs beyond Brobby, playing it into his feet. He was getting beyond. He looked fantastic that day. But I just thought it showed how far we'd come this day, Andrew.
It did, and we did it without Xhaka, which was important because people who maybe don't follow Sunderland have a tendency to just assume we're a one-man team. It is really important that we look at the differences in the club from this point and maybe 12 months prior, because Burnley were streets ahead of us, and yet it had turned round completely. We were now the team who just looked a level above them. I know Burnley ended up going down with a whimper, but if I may, yet again, repeat myself, Sunderland at home to a team struggling at the bottom hasn't always guaranteed points in the past. We've blown that, Teams haven't won away from home in months, and then they rock up at Sunderland and turn it on and look like prime Brazil. So we were professional. We did what we needed to do. I think those 2 goals in the first half came within quick succession, and it basically meant the game was won by the break. They were very similar in a lot of respects. I think they both came down the right wing, and a lot of our goals have come down that right wing. Even the one at West Ham, the consolation, was a good move down the flanks. So the game itself doesn't really stand out for me, but that isn't a bad thing. That's a good thing, because it just shows that we are an accomplished side who can lift it when we need to, but also when things are different, we can just win a game comfortably. It's really pleasing to know that Sunderland can adapt and play different ways depending on the opposition. It's not just that we make it tough for the top teams. We can play against a side we're expected to beat, and we can do it. We can handle that pressure. We know how to approach it. We make the most of possession. So 3-0 Monday night. Everybody gets to see it. Everybody can be under no illusion that we're a good side. And I think you said we're wrapping up this episode now. I'm just glad I've been able to try and keep you lot in check and keep it down to a nice, trim, punchy an hour and a half podcast. So job done by Sunderland against Burnley, and I think job done by me as well.
Yep, I've just looking at my notes quickly for that Burnley game. I've got the most comfortable 90 minutes of the season, dominant, and it was actually the first time that we'd led by 2 goals at half-time this season in that game. But as Andrew said, we had aimed to get through the whole season in less time than we've taken to get through about a third of the season. So once again, we thought we were going to finish up in part 2, but we're going to need a part 3. So that just leaves me to say thank you to, we'll say, our time wasters. Certainly didn't waste any time going through any of this. To Andrew, to Martin, and to Gav. Gav, the part-timer, joining us halfway through. Thank you very much, mate.
I'm not taking the blame for you lot dragging on. I've only been here for half an hour.
Well, yeah, that's the extra half an hour right there.
It was a good half an hour though, Gav, wasn't it? It was a good half an hour.
Best half an hour of my life.
Glad your other half doesn't listen our way the podcast. Anyway, so that just leaves you. Thank you again for your time, gents, and thanks again to everyone for listening. Once again, we're going to be back every day on How the podcast with an episode every day, and look out over on the Roker Report website. Because we'll have all the latest of what's going on at Sunderland AFC on there. Look out for part 3 of this season review as well. But from us, it's bye for now.